Hey everybody, I'm gonna make a video here basically because I've been the beneficiary of so many of these videos in doing various little jobs, not just on the car but on other stuff. So today what I'm gonna try to do is repair the sunroof on my 76 911. The sunroof, I bought the car with a broken sunroof, although it kind of works because it'll close automatically, but you have to open it by hand, and that's because there's a couple of pieces inside that are broken. So I found some parts on Kijiji, picked them up from an owner who had a 77, but I think the parts actually come from an even later car, but I believe they'll work to replace the sunroof cables and get this sunroof back working again. So one of the problems with the sunroof, not only the cable's broken, but I'm not sure that the video is going to pick this up, but the rear, the trailing edge of the sunroof here also doesn't sit quite up as it should, and that's because of the broken piece. So hopefully that problem is also going to be resolved. And yes, the paintwork is sketchy. That's then once I get these mechanical problems sorted out, I'm gonna get a repaint. So the first step is to access the sunroof motor, and actually what I did was I just very slightly backed off the sunroof switch so that it will go back. I had to push that back by hand because of the broken parts. And then there's a zipper here that goes across the headliner to access the motor. So there's the motor, and it's held in place by two screws, and you just undo those screws and the motor will drop down. It'll still be connected by this rubber coupling, but once you get it, once it kind of flops down and the cables are a bit, it's released from the cables, you'll see that it just plugs into that rubber coupling. You should be able to remove the motor without any further tools. All right, so here's the motor, and you can see, so I call this the motor. It's not actually the motor, it's just a gear assembly that transfers the torque from the motor to that cogged gear, which you can see that pulls the sunroof cables open and closed. And now that the transmission assembly has been removed, the sunroof should actually just move back and forth by pushing it, because those cables, which you can see if this refocuses, yep, right there. So you can just see the cables peeking out right there. Those cables run in tubes, and I'll try to show you that too. That's the tube going to the driver's side. There's another one on the passenger side, of course, and those cables pull the sunroof open. So now with the sunroof partially open, what you're going to do is you're going to remove the headliner that's part of the sunroof from the sunroof panel, and this is a bit of a delicate procedure. When I did this, I've done this once before, and when I did it before, I actually just made my own tool with a metal ruler and some packing tape to keep it from scratching the finish and damaging the headliner. I've since bought this simple kit from Pelican of upholstery tools, and you're just going to stick it in there. I think there's 3 of these clips across, and you just find where the clip is gently, and then a tug will get it out. So ironically, I actually decided to return to the original tool that I made because the trim removal tool, this edge was too thick, and I was a little worried that it would damage the headliner material, which has got to be pretty fragile at this stage. So this one's nice and thin, and I used it previously and was able to slide it right in. So that should be the first one, and you just kind of go along, and there's the next one, and you go along until you feel some resistance, and then you just give it a gentle tug like that. So I said there was 3 clips. There's actually 7. And once you get all those undone, you just push the sunroof forward a little bit, and now that the clips are below the sunroof, you should be able to slide that headliner piece just back into the car, and that gives you access to the mounting hardware. So we're looking here at the driver's side, and there's two bolts. They look like 10 millimeter bolts at the front, and at the back there's two. They look like 8 millimeter bolts. You have to slide this spring out of the way to get access to those. That's the spring right there. So I just wanted to clarify, these are actually 8 millimeter, and the inboard screw is a bit longer, and also it seems to be a kind of a form of nylock. It's got what looks like may have been a plastic insert along the threads there. So the bolts on the passenger side were actually the same length. And then once you remove that, you can take out this guide piece, which has a little plastic insert in it, as well as a kind of a washer, a sort of flat lock washer arrangement. So make sure you don't lose that little piece. So the bolts on the back side are 7 mil, and then there's this flat cover piece that was tucked in like that, and I just pulled it out so as to not lose it. This is the piece that's connected to the cable, and I'll be replacing that along with the cable. Okay, once the hardware has been removed, you should be able to just carefully lift the sunroof out. It's a bit tricky getting the panel out, by the way. What I did was I reached in, pushed the panel all the way forward, and then pushed up and was able to get it out like that. I didn't film that because I didn't want to scratch the finish. You know, it's not the greatest finish, but I don't need any more scratches. And you can begin to see the problem here, which is this piece is supposed to be connected to the cable, and it's not connected anymore. Here I've got the parts that I bought online, and they're probably from 1980 SC or something like that, because they've got metal brass fittings where the original car had plastic, and it's the plastic that broke. So you can see how that piece fits in there, and the plastic just wasn't up to it after about 40 years. You mentioned, two things actually, that I have to replace the rails as well, because these fittings have a slightly wider parts of them, the cable itself, and this fitting, it won't work in the original track, so I bought these with the tracks. And then secondly, the cables come, and this is true of also new cables, they come with a kind of a fuzzy insert, because they're not meant to be greased. They're meant to slide through the channels without grease, and the newer ones use fuzz. But my understanding for these cars is you have to get rid of the fuzz. So I did spend a couple of weekends. It was a lot of work. I bought a little Dremel tool, and I actually just kind of used a wire brush to get rid of the fuzz from each of these cables. So now I'm on the driver's side, and this is the piece that came out from there. That's the broken plastic piece. That's actually attached to the cable. And the last three numbers here on the fitting is 629, and the other side, I just checked, it's 630. So driver's side is 62. And to get the cables out, I'm gonna have to take these rails out. So I'll take this piece out. I'm gonna replace the rails anyway. So they come. Okay, I removed those two trim pieces there and there. And now what you have to do is extricate this guide rail and the cable from the tube at the back. So I'm happy to report that the new cable and fitting actually does fit into the old guide rail, and I'm happy because my guide rails are in better condition than the replacements that I bought, and I know at a minimum that it'll fit back into the same slot, although the new guide rails do seem to have the same dimensions. See if I can get that to focus in there. I've assumed all along that one of the trickier bits, yeah, I can't seem to get that to focus. There we go. Would be I've assumed all along that one of the trickier bits would be to feed the new cable into that little slot. So this is kind of the point of no return. Once I pull the old cable out, I got to get that new cable in. We'll see how it goes. All right, so I've put the new used cable assembly inside the guide, and now I'm gonna feed that in there, because obviously you can't get the cable into your guide once the guide rail is installed. Okay, so that was very tricky, and the hardest part was the cable, because you can't get right down to the aperture. When I pushed on the cable would flex, so I actually did use the other guide rail that I had just to kind of support the cable to prevent it from twisting and flexing as I pushed it in to the aperture. Okay, so that's one side in with the trim pieces installed, and it moves relatively freely, so I think that should be okay. All right, so that was a real struggle. This is the passenger side rail, and somebody at some point had pinched the side of it. Well, for one thing, the cable, you should realize, goes in the other side of the rail on this side. I spent about half an hour trying to put it in the inboard side. It is on the inboard side over on the driver's side, but here it's on the outboard side. And because of that pinched channel there, I had a really hard time getting the new brass fitting through there. Real struggle. And now I still have to fit it into the tube at the back of the car. Okay, thankfully that bit went quite smoothly. I didn't have to use the other rail in order to get the wire into the cable into the tube. You may have noticed earlier I had removed the headliner, the part of the sunroof. It's a very fragile bit of kit, and I'm pretty sure you have to put it in before you screw down these rails, because you're going to require at least one side to be a bit loose. It's going to tuck in right under the rail, between the rail and the roof, which itself has headliner material on it, so you have to be a bit careful doing that. All right, so now I'm ready to put the sunroof panel back in. I did put one small drop of lube right here just to help that move, and I didn't use my old brackets here because these were already attached and they looked identical. They have different numbers on them, but they look identical. So I did buy replacement pieces here from Pelican. I wasn't going to install any of them because they weren't broken, and I do want to paint the car, and I'll take the sunroof apart when the car gets painted. But this one now did get broken, so I'm going to go ahead and replace those two on the outside edge. Reinstalled the fixing point that's actually where the cable is. That's what attaches the sunroof to the car. The front is just a guide that will slide along the top of that guide rail. Okay, so I got the mounting hardware in place and snapped the headliner back into the sunroof panel. Now that all that's left to do is to reinstall the transmission
which is right up there. And to show you that, there's just a flat side on that fitting, and that goes into the rubber coupling, and then you screw it in place. The cables themselves, I've got the roof lined up quite straight from side to side, and that should just handle, you don't have to do any adjustment, I'm told, other than that. And I've removed this transmission before and had no problem, so I'm hoping that's gonna take care of itself. So one little hint, as I was putting the transmission back in place, it was quite reluctant to go in, and it occurred to me that that metal cog, if I just crushed it into place, it might damage the cables. So what I did was I just wiggled the sunroof kind of back and forth and tried to push up on the transmission at the same time until it seated. It did seem to seat a little bit better, so hopefully that it caught into the spiral on the cable and it won't be damaged. All right, just about ready to give it a try. Okay, so here goes. Let's see if it works. Yeah, awesome. Have that problem with the trailing edge sitting down. So there you go. Sunroof repair on a 76 911. Thanks for joining me.